Is Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through to 5. You can text us 53106. Many texts coming in about that amazing day in Wellington today. A 32 points to 22 win for Ireland over the All Blacks. We've won the series. Ruaidhri O'Connor, rugby correspondent of the Irish Independent, in studio with me. What a day, Rory.
Incredible, John. These things, you know, if you go back to when you first got interested in rugby, I'm sure lots of our listeners grew up in the 80s, 90s, maybe a bit older than that. Even the idea of winning once in New Zealand was well beyond what Irish rugby could achieve, and to think of how much this country as a rugby force has grown since, you know, Warren Gatlin's team in 2000 really, and just knocked off one piece of history after another, to become now the world's number one team at the end of a long season and a series winning team in New Zealand, something that only less than a handful of teams have ever done in history. You know, to go down there to beat New Zealand once was an incredible achievement, but to back it up is historic and one of the greatest achievements. We were just talking about beforehand. Whether it's the greatest, I'm still not sure, but it's up there. It's right up there, and it's the way they delivered it as well. It's not just about the win, it's the fact that they played with such incredible composure and accuracy in the first half and looked every bit worth that lead that they took in the first half. But also when the heat came, they weathered that storm and they wrested momentum of an incredible test match back into their own favour through their own goodies. They got a bit of luck with the yellow card, red card decision, but you know, when you see Tyke Byrne making that series of turnovers in his own half, I mean, that is just a player stepping up and saying, not today. And as you consider where they've come from and what is ahead, it's an incredible achievement, and it also speaks to a team that's learning, a team that's growing, and a team that has huge potential in the next, 14 to 18 months.
Like even a few weeks ago in this studio, Rory, we were lamenting Ireland's first test display, the fact that we got cut apart in the first test in the second quarter. We're going, we don't have a hope in the World Cup quarter final if we face New Zealand.
Use it, John.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just trying to make everybody on it. What's changed, or what changed in that between then and now?
The big thing that happened that day was that Johnny Sexton went off, and it's not the only thing that happened, but there is a correlation between Sexton going off after 20 minutes and the team absolutely collapsing. And as I said at the time, it wasn't down to Joey Carberry's personality or anything like that. It's just that there is a very important man in the room, when he's in the room, everything works, and when he's not there, the concern is that it ceases to function in the same way. And all the things we talked about that day are still relevant. You know, I mean, we have more faith in this 15 and this 23. You know, the fact that Cian Healy is fit enough to come off the bench and do a job, he wasn't that day, that was a concern because the scrum was in trouble. We have more faith in someone like Kieran Treadwell and Finlay Bealon coming off the bench. They've proven themselves. You know, you have concerns about these people, then they give you the evidence, and they you can take comfort from that. Rob Herring stepping in and doing really, really well. But what happened in that, what happened in that 20-minute period was even 15 minutes when he's conceded 28 tries without reply. Sorry, 28 points without reply. 28 tries would be something else. 28 points without reply before half-time and lost control of the match was deeply worrying at the time. But what we've seen in the subsequent 2 weeks is a team that's been able to learn from that, that's been able to control those moments. A team that today went down to 14 men and took 4 or 5 minutes off the clock by opting to take points. They were smart. They learned across the series. They got better across the series. And you couldn't say that about New Zealand. And I was in on Wednesday, I think it was, with Joe, and I was talking about how New Zealand used to be the thought leaders in the sport. They used to be the ones who set the agenda, who set everything in motion, and everyone copied them. But they're not the smartest team in the room right now. Ireland may not be either, because South Africa, France, both are probably up there, if not ahead of Ireland in the pecking order. New Zealand are firmly fourth at best team in the world right now. So, but that doesn't diminish the achievement. No one remembers where Ireland were in the world rankings when New Zealand were beating them all those times in a row over the years. It's about going down there and winning is a massive achievement. There are still concerns going into the rest of this World Cup cycle. Johnny Sexton will still be 38 next year, but if this 15 plus Ronan Keller, Ian Henderson who are out, maybe Jordan Larmour coming into form, are available, you've got a chance in any game, whether it's a quarter-final, semi-final, final. This team is capable of going on to do great things, but if there are still a couple of positions where if there's an injury, in particular 10, we will have problems. But they've gotten through this series with Sexton. At that time, we thought Sexton was going to be out of the second test, if you remember.
Yeah.
That was a big worry as well, and how they would cope in that way. And I didn't think he should play the second test. He came back, he played really well in both games, and he is still so important to that team. And he's brilliant. He's played so well today, and he's going to be Ireland's top point scorer. Assuming he avoids injury next year, and his achievements in the game are stand alone.
So this was potentially a degree of an experimental tour if we'd lost the second test, and maybe like today we would have seen players come in from the fringes. But this suddenly turned in with New Zealand's kamikaze indiscipline last week. This suddenly turned into a situation where we are now going to try and win on consecutive weeks, and that will give us a huge amount of confidence for the World Cup that we can win in consecutive weeks against one of the top nations.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, to back it up in that way, it's the first time New Zealand have lost twice at home in a row since 1989, I think. One of the fears I would have about Ireland in a World Cup is that if they ever got over the quarter-final hump, that they would think that was the achievement and then not turn up in the semi. And we saw in the last World Cup, New Zealand beat Ireland with an incredible performance, couldn't get going against England. England were brilliant that day, but a week later they tanked against South Africa in the final. It's hard to do. And they would have known the historic... Sorry, they did know the historic context of last week. They spoke about it, but it was interesting how Sexton, very muted in the post-match stuff. They celebrated with the fans. By all accounts, didn't go crazy on Saturday night. They knew that there was a job to be done in Wellington today. That's a sign that they got to base camp almost, but they kept on going. They didn't think that was the achievement, and that's really, really encouraging. That they, in the past, a one-off win would have been enough. A lot of people said, they've done it now.
Australia, the 2011 World Cup was the one that came to mind. Won a group game.
France in 2015, 2015 that day when they lost all their 5 of the most important players, but the celebrations at the end of that game, and it was a release that was built up internally as a massive game, but they just couldn't get going against Argentina the following week. There is a history of that. This is a sign. Now we don't know, because when the World Cups take on lives of their own, and there's a lot could happen between now and 2023, as we know, from 2018 into 2019. So you can't say that this will guarantee Ireland anything next year. It's just all experiences. It's all things that we can kind of take comfort from. But the players, as they head towards the Sun Loungers now, will know that they can get the job done in a very difficult place and beat a very good team, albeit one that's poorly coached and not playing particularly well at the moment, but still away from home and capable of incredible individual moments like we saw in that second half. And in the way that it felt like it was getting away from them.
Yeah, Will Jordan, every time he got the ball, I was going, oh no.
Yeah, Artie Survey in that second half. Yeah, Akira Ioane as well. I mean, like, he looked like he had the cheat codes for John Luma Rugby at one stage. He was just, that's what New Zealand bring. Like, Ireland don't really have players who are capable of those incredible individual moments. They have an incredible attacking plan, a huge defiant defence. They have a lot of great things, and they've become a really, really good team. It's not the greatest collection of individuals in Irish rugby history, but God, did they come together and forge a really, really good team. And Andy Farrell, Mike Catt, Paul O'Connell, Simon Easterby and John Fogarty, plus Gary Keegan, who's kind of there for the mental skills, the kind of, I don't think he's officially a sports psychologist, but he's there to kind of hone that part of it. They can all take credit for it, as well as the leadership group who are there as well, who are driving things on from a player's point of view. 53106,
hey guys, give us a break. When there's something at stake, New Zealand will wipe the floor with Ireland. Nobody's fooled by the present results. Did you ever hear the term money talks?
I hear, that person clearly just hasn't taken into the context of this. Like, the coach is going to lose his job over this. The captain may never play for the All Blacks again. Like, Sam Cane was taken off after 60 minutes. If you think there was nothing at stake for the All Blacks there today, like, Aaron Smith was in bawling crying in the anthems. That's before they even got to the haka. Like, right. The haka, they were like that. This means everything to New Zealand. You can dismiss it all you like as a friendly or whatever.
I've been getting all that on Twitter already.
Yeah, I know. Like, this thing, it's rubbish. Like, it's absolute rubbish. You just look at what it means to New Zealanders today. There's going to be an inquest over this. They're playing South Africa in 3 weeks away from home twice in a row. They're in crisis because Ireland have beat them. I mean, to say it doesn't matter, it dismisses the traditions of the sport, and it's really churlish, I think. I think some people don't like rugby, fair enough, but come on, that's a serious achievement in anyone's book.
Yeah, the cynicism I've seen today, and I symbolically, I felt this was one of the greatest days since Romania in 1990, and I'm not a rugby man. I just like winning down in New Zealand against the All Blacks. The Lions haven't won there since 1971. Nobody's won there in the professional era.
Yeah, not a series. Yeah, no, it's an incredible achievement. I haven't quite processed where it ranks. I wouldn't go as far as you, John. I wouldn't incur that wrath. But I mean, to say they didn't care about it, to go as far as that, it's willfully, it's just stirring the pot, really. And these players have, like, look, we're not saying they're going to win the World Cup next year. We're not getting carried away by it, but you have to say what you see. I mean, what happened today
was... doesn't have to have a trophy at the end of it.
It did have a trophy. It was a nice big shiny thing.
But it doesn't have to have a trophy at the end of it for it to not matter hugely significant.
Yeah, like Ireland have only been on tour for 3 test series in New Zealand once before, but that's because we were never considered good enough to be invited, really. Or we probably didn't consider ourselves good enough to go down there and play them 3 times in a week, because it would have been disastrous. We've had good teams in the past, but really the only team that went down there with the Lions, South Africa, Australia, England, France, teams that were strong enough to compete. For Ireland, with a playing base of our size, a population base of our size, with a history like ours where we didn't ever beat them until 2016, and people have already started diminishing the Chicago achievement. I mean, at the time that was huge, and then you go and double down in Dublin, you beat them again in Dublin. Sure, they lost 2019 World Cup when it mattered the most, and that is a legitimate point, but you cannot say to me that this match did not matter. Just because football has decided that international friendlies don't matter doesn't mean that these matches don't matter in this sport. Like the Ashes is a huge thing in cricket. The different sports have different contexts. It was an incredible... we shouldn't even be having to defend it. It stands on its own.
I think it's important to say it, because I think it's been just brushed aside by some people out there. 5-3-1-6, fantastic win for Ireland. Hopefully they'll carry the confidence into the World Cup and reach the Holy Grail, which they're capable of doing, says David and Cavan. Today's win is up there with Romania penalty shootout 1990 Italia. It's a very special and motive day for Irish sport. Outstanding performance, so proud of our little island. We really came of age today. Roll on France is Dennis in Cork. I'm not exclusively a rugby fan. In fact, I lean more towards GA, but I take great pride in Irish achievements, and what a wonderful morning it was. They were absolutely incredible. What a game. And yes, for the cynics to say it was a friendly, I believe there was actually a cup awarded at the end, as you said there. That's from Finn in Navan. Rory, I'm interested, 2018, won the Grand Slam, beat New Zealand, but it was a very, I don't know if conservative is the word, but it was a game plan that was quite functional and precise, and we didn't make many mistakes under Schmidt. It became stale. Other countries figured us out. Is there more excitement about the expansive style of play? We got 4 tries today in Wellington. It's still very structured. I mean, when they beat New Zealand in 2016, they opened up and scored, I think it was 5 tries that day. It was an incredible attacking performance, but certainly the Schmidt era was based on a lot of detail, a lot of prepared strike attacking play, a lot of basically don't make mistakes, keep your discipline tight. It was really successful for a long time. It was really successful, and nothing should take away. I must get credit for what during that period. It got figured out. He failed. One of the key things in the IRFU's review after the World Cup, which we didn't get to see in full, but David Nussfor told us what he thought of it, was that they basically didn't evolve. They got to the top at the end of 2018. They won Coach of the Year, Team of the Year, Player of the Year at the World Rugby Awards. February, Eddie Jones came with the Saracens-based England team and knocked them off the perch. In one fell swoop, they just knocked their confidence. I think Joe Schmidt said they were a bit broken at the end of it. And mentally, they suffered badly after that. And then they couldn't get their game back. So they're open for that happening again in the next year. That's definitely a possibility that they could rest on their laurels and not evolve. The difference I think now is that the camp is less stifling than it was in Joe Schmidt's era. I think what Schmidt relied on control to a huge degree, and you're expected to be on a lot more than Andy Farrell does. Versus enjoyment. There was a fear, and you don't want to overplay it either, because as I say, it was very successful, and a lot of players would tell you that they had enjoyed their best years of their careers under his watch. But I certainly, from listening to the players and from talking to people around the setup, there is a much more, when you're on, you're on, when you're off, you're off. And when you're on a tour like this, you can't be on all the time. At the end of a long season, you need to be able to get away from it and not be worrying about the next day. The video review sessions are less intense. They're more they're shorter. They're on your feet. They take the cameras out. Sorry, they take the TV out to the pitch. They learn from it. They go out and do it. They come back. They look at it. It's all a little bit more light. Now, some people thought once you release that pressure valve on Irish players, they wouldn't be able to deliver anymore. But what Andy Farrell has found is that he trusts the players to deliver. He still expects them to perform, and there's a huge amount of detail goes into that Irish attack. Even though it looks like it's flowing, everyone knows their roles at play in advance. But it's more complex. They're trusting their skills an awful lot more because the coach is giving them that trust, and it's paying off. And it's really, really good to watch. I mean, the way they flowed for that Henshaw try, the Keenan try as well. They were lovely attacking tries. Yeah, they caught New Zealand on the blind side for the Keenan one. It was zigzagging and it was accurate, and maybe in the past you would expect them to knock it on or something. Executed.
Yeah, and even they're not afraid to not score, if you know what I mean. They'll take. Yeah. If the first minute Caelan Doris sidesteps, they identified a really good piece of analysis by Vinnie Hammond's team that was fed back to the coaching ticket. They identified that the All Blacks props can't tackle. So Caelan Doris just glides past Nepo Laulala in the first few seconds of the game, and they're on the attack from the start, and they have New Zealand after their emotional anthem and their haka, they have them on the back foot. And Bowden Barrett, I think it was his 3rd intercept in 3 tests, but he pulls off a brilliant intercept on Peter O'Mahony. That in the past would have been a gut punch to Ireland because they were flowing, it didn't work. They went back and scored off a maul 2 minutes later or 3 minutes later. These are all signs that this team believes that they enjoy the way they play. I think it looks like, I think towards the end as well under Schmidt, the players, because things had changed at Leinster and they were playing a bit more like this, the players they went to Joe and they said we want to change, and he wouldn't go with them because he felt like it was working for them. Now they're playing with an identity that they feel comfortable with and they love, and they're enjoying it, and it's working, and they're all over teams. They're swarming through them, they're breaking the lines, they're catching the All Blacks on the blind side when they're not ready. The pace with which Gibson Park is playing, the options that he has, it's exciting and to play in, and it's incredible to watch. And there were times during Joe Schmidt's success where people were like Andy Dunn was in here, and he very much called that this is going to run aground. But I think the way Ireland play gives them a chance, even against the teams. I think they're quite suited to playing against the All Blacks. My fear is that against the biggest, most physical
the French,
teams,
the South Africans,
they may run aground. But it gives them a chance. Even in Paris, the way they played in that second half, they played themselves back in because France couldn't live with their option taking. They couldn't live with the amount of viable carriers that Ireland had, and that gives them a chance in any game. Now there's a mental challenge to a World Cup quarter-final and all that stuff as well, so there's lots of things to overcome, and there's a long time to go until then, but they're in a very good spot.
Was there not a moment against France in Six Nations where we should have kicked to the corner and we didn't, and was Sexton off the pitch at the time? Or
James Ryan made that call. The Sexton didn't play in Paris because it was Joey Carberry started. The fact that Ireland got close,
Sexton was kicking to the corner every time.
Sexton's decision making, I mean, that wasn't something that Sexton, they weren't brilliant at that when Farrell first took over. If you remember that game in Paris, the previous time in Paris when they went over with a chance of winning the title and they made a series of bad decisions. I think Conor Murray took a long range shot at goal he was never going to get. There was ones to the corner that shouldn't have gone. They took the points. I can't remember the exact details now, but I remember it was a big talking point. And Sexton was a new captain, and then he threw the strop coming off the pitch when Ross Byrne came on. And then true to this time when he was off the pitch and James Ryan took that decision, I thought that was a slightly overplayed. I didn't think it was a bad call really, but it was questioned afterwards. Whereas today they got all those decisions right. Now they're all decisions that look right in hindsight. The decisions to go for the points today were largely based on the fact that Andrew Porter was off the pitch and they took a lot of time off the clock. It also allowed them to get their breath back, get their legs back, and they got 3 points from it. It could have been 6 had the second one not hit the crossbar. So it just these things, I mean, it's all scoreboard journalism to some degree in that they worked. If they'd gone to the kicks and New Zealand had run it back, you'd be questioning whether they should have gone for the kill. They went for the kill then when they had 15 on the pitch and Rob Herring scored his try. Everything worked out for them over the last. I mean, they got the yellow card when it could have been red with Andrew Porter. They rode their luck, but if you're going to do these things, you've got to ride your luck as well. That's part of it. That's part of elite sport. Not every, some days some things go your way, some things they don't. That went their way today, but ultimately they put themselves in that position through their own good play and their own accuracy, and that has to be applauded. Now,
it's hard to single anybody out, but I thought Tyg Byrne at times was absolutely magisterial, and Robbie Henshaw was the guy we saw on the Lions tour.
Yeah, Byrne's second half performance was one of the greatest individual performances you'll ever see in an Ireland jersey. To win those turnovers under that amount of pressure, and not just to do it once but to do it 3 times, and then also force a counter ruck with it, just a piece of raw aggression and just good timing. Incredible, absolutely incredible. And that game was getting away from Ireland, and he was the one, he wasn't alone, but he was the one who stepped up at big moments. And Peter O'Mahony has had a number of big moments in this across this tour, and always shows up against the All Blacks. But Byrne was the one today who said, not today, this is our game. Henshaw in the first half, a couple of incredible tackles. Ty Furlong emptied one of the All Blacks at one stage. Their defence was really, really good. Josh van der Fleer, I mean, you run out of things to say about Josh van der Fleer because his story is so well told at this stage. The way he has improved and improved and improved and improved, and now he's just this complete back row forward who's capable of taking on anyone and is one of the best players in the world now. Gibson Park, all 3 of the Irish guys who came from New Zealand, they all delivered. James Lowe, like Andy Farrell, didn't drop anyone really from the first test. He backed them all into the second test. They nearly all delivered in that second test. Lowe didn't. He had a poor game last week. He stuck with Lowe. Lowe delivered.
Infuses confidence, that
it absolutely does, and you worry again about the depth and whether he's whether players will get complacent. It looks like they're going to play for him. It looks like it's the opposite of that they respond to it. Maybe he has a quiet word and says, "Look, I'm giving you a chance today, not next time." Lowe was outstanding today. Really, really outstanding. There was no bad performances out there. Like last week, I thought it was 1 or 2 that could have got better. They all got better today. Set piece was good. James Ryan, I think before we were discussing him, maybe it was the day I was in with you, his form was in question coming over here. He terrorised an All Black line-out that had...
This is the James Ryan of 18 around then?
Yeah, it's No, it's the 2022 James Ryan, because he's had to adapt, he's had to grow, because Joe Schmidt's game plan asked him to do different things, and he was probably more comfortable doing those things. Now, in the second test, he was throwing passes behind his back and they were coming off, and you're seeing this time in this setup for 4 weeks has grown his game and grown his belief, and he's coming back to Leinster next season with a bit more confidence, having been, fairly dented over the last year or two. So that's huge. Caelan Doris, bad first test, unbelievable today, and in the second test, you just start listing them out, and it's probably the most impressive is the less heralded players that came off the bench, like Beelum, like Herring. Cian Healy's not less heralded, but you kind of feel like he's coming towards the end. He stood up today when he came on. Kieran Treadwell, pretty much unmapped. He won a couple of caps in 17. Andy Farrell's brought him back in. Doesn't start for Ulster on the big days. He comes off the bench. Well, he's a serious option for Ireland now in the second row. Murray showed good calm when he came on. Earl's the same, and Carberry wins an intercept and kicks the ball out at the end. He's got question marks over him, but again, he goes into next season. How many times he's beaten the All Blacks now in his short career? It's incredible stat for him. So, there's a lot. They leave with a huge amount of positivity, and they know that if they deliver that level of performance, they're pretty much capable of beating anyone on their day.
53106 is probably the best text of the day. Love the mix of passion and analysis, and Rory cannot believe there are people out there trying to diminish today's magnificent achievements. Great to see where these lads can go after this, says Ian in Dublin. And also Andy Farrell is Irish Rugby's Jack Charlton, which is a good one as well. They respect us now. They know who we are now. It's not just, you got
Fear us now.
O'Driscoll and Sexton, they're your players, are they?
Yeah, O'Brien was the other one. They fear us. It's gone past respect. There's a fear factor. Like everyone's talking about, and obviously there is a chance now that Ian Foster gets sacked and there's a new coach in place, and Ireland may meet New Zealand in the World Cup quarter final next year, but they won't relish that draw. And one of the reasons they came up so short against England in the World Cup semi-final was because they put so much into that quarter-final, and Ireland were poor in the day, but New Zealand were incredible. They put everything into that and they couldn't get back up for it the following week. Ireland have had the respect since 2016. We saw that when they came back over 2 weeks later and started taking heads. There's a fear there now as well, and this is not overdoing it. If you go down there and beat them twice out of three, beat the Maori as well, and do it so comprehensively, Ireland have emasculated New Zealand rugby over the last couple of weeks, and there is they're in crisis. This is 100 million.
This is their national sport. It's a national issue. It's front page stuff in New Zealand.
Yeah. Well, Ian Foster now
is gone. He must be gone.
I've never seen a man exude being under pressure so much. He just epitomised what being under pressure looks like at the start. Before the game, when he was giving his interview, his head was puce. He was hunched up. His body language was really the pressure that he's feeling is just it's outrageous. And you can overdo these things, but he has been the subject of speculation about his future all week in the New Zealand media, even in the New Zealand Herald, which is generally very much on side with what the All Blacks are saying. They even get messages out via that oracle, but this week the New Zealand Herald turned, and when the New Zealand Herald turns, it's very hard to get that back, and this will sting them massively. They always thought they could beat Ireland. There was a certain cachet of teams that they always just thought that they could take for granted. Now Ireland have gone above them, and Ireland are still chasing France and South Africa, so they can't take any confidence from the fact that France and South Africa, they can take out France or South Africa. I think they play England in November. England are starting to turn a corner as well and coming back strong.
They beat Australia today, 21-17.
Australia were really good. If they hadn't suffered a load of cataclysmic injuries over the course of this series, they could have beaten England.
But it's a more level playing field, though.
It's a far more level playing field, and New Zealand, while they still have incredible individual talent that will get them out of holes on any occasion, they're not the force that they once were. And this again isn't to diminish Ireland, but Ireland have played a role in undermining them over the years, and they're. This could well be the end of Ian Foster. Maybe they'll give him the South Africa tour to rescue his career there. But Ireland have played a huge role in that process.
But there's a symbolic, significance to this. It's winning against the All Blacks down in New Zealand. It is being able to beat France, which we have. I remember in 2000, Brian O'Driscoll's hat-trick, it was a huge, we hadn't won there since 1972, and we know we can go to Paris and win. It's not easy, but we know we can go there and do that. The drop goal, Johnny Sexton. We know we can go to Twickenham and win on Patrick's Day. We're knocking off the in the bowling alley, we're knocking off the pins in terms of achieving things.
One to go. It's just one to go. And
like Brian Driscoll was even saying the week, even winning this series is bigger than winning a World Cup quarterfinal.
I agree with him, because the quarterfinal has become this thing.
Yeah, an albatross.
No one goes to the World Cup hoping to win a quarterfinal. You want to win the World Cup, and this is, as our friends who are texting in will point out, there's not a huge amount of quality teams in World Rugby. Ireland are one of 8 or 9 who go there with some expectation of performing to a high level, and should be backing themselves next year to win the World Cup. Like, it's not about winning a quarterfinal. Now, they're on a tough side of the draw, and I think when that monkey finally gets off the back, whether it's 2003, 2007 or 2031 or in America or whenever it's going to be, it will be a cause for celebration. But this is an achievement. This is an outright win. Winning a quarterfinal just gets you into a semi-final, and if you don't show up the following week, you're in a third, fourth place playoff, and nobody wants to be in a third, fourth place playoff. You want to go and back to back to back and go and win the World Cup, because this team should be aiming for that. I'm not saying they will, because there are other teams out there who are better than the All Blacks and maybe better than them. Like France are really, really good at the moment, and I still fear them to a large degree. So that's why this, as a standalone, this is up there with Grand Slams. The quarterfinal thing will be a big weight off when it happens, but it's not the achievement in itself. It's just another step along the road.
Where does this leave in terms of the evolution of the team now over the next year and a bit, Rory? The graduates who'll be like pushing for inclusion from what you've seen over the last while in terms of getting into the team, or giving us options if we have injuries or whatever.
Well, that's the thing. I think the Maori games have been where we've seen the next, what is the next cab off the rank if there's an injury, who can step up in the next year. Gavin Coombs was excellent. Now, getting to that back row, I don't know how you do it. Who do you take out? O'Mahony, arguably player of the series. Tyburn was, I don't know who won.
But you can see with Conan. Conan was a line, and
Conan was a line, but it was a long. That was a long year. He'll get a summer off now. He didn't. He hasn't finished with an injury. He'll get a full pre-season under his belt, and he can come back stronger. If he doesn't, Coombs is there to take his place, because Coombs was really good. I thought Timoney was excellent, another option, but that's just if Josh Van der Veer goes down, because right now the form, all the players are in form. Treadwell was, by all accounts from the people who were in New Zealand, the camp were most impressed with Kieran Treadwell in terms of how he moved. Joe McCarthy went over with huge expectations. He'll gain an awful lot. He's only 21, just turned 21. He'll come back to Leinster, having been on tour with Ireland for 4 weeks in New Zealand, played 2 games against the Maori. Incredibly powerful, big man. The big one, I think, the big talking point coming home is Kieran Frawley. Because the 10 thing is a bit of a national obsession, and it's because, for all that he is an outstanding rugby player and still the captain, still the main man, you're putting your eggs in a very fragile basket when you're asking a 38-year-old to get you through an entire World Cup campaign. And because Joey Carbery missed a couple of key tackles in the first 2 tests, and because his form for Munster was so poor, there is potentially an opening there as Sexton's backup. Harry Byrne went over as the third choice, never got a minute because he got injured in the first training session. Apparently picked up one hamstring injury in the first training session, picked up another one at the other side towards the end of the tour, and ended up going home. Frawley got 2 really, really quality games under his belt against the Maori and played very well in the second one, and he was good. He's the most physically, and in terms of the way he carries himself on the pitch, he looks the closest thing we have to Sexton. And he goes back to Leinster now, I think, as a viable option to play 10 for them. The only problem he has is that Ross Byrne is sitting in the Leinster number 10 jersey when Johnny's away and never lets Leinster down. Now, you could argue the 2 La Rochelle games he didn't cover himself in glory, and that they need to go another level up, especially as they future-proof the team for life after Sexton, which is the season after next. But right now, Ireland need Frawley playing games in the number 10 jersey, and if he's not going to do that for Leinster, they've got to look at moving him, whether it's abroad, whether it's to one of the other provinces. Is he going to supplant Jack Carty at Connacht? Probably not, but could he get a lot more minutes at Connacht? Probably. Ulster, Billy Burns, I think he's a better player than Billy Burns. Would Ulster, would this be, like, if the system works and if the system is aligned, there's got to be some really hard conversations in the next months. Munster have Healy, Crowley and Carbery. They're probably well enough. Healy's someone who could come through in the next year as well, but Frawley is the one that they need to get minutes into, and they need to have ready for next year's World Cup, because he looks like he could go as that third 10. And that third 10, as we know from the All Blacks in 2011, could become a very pivotal player very, very quickly in a World Cup as well.
Yeah, big time. It was 8-7, wasn't it, to New Zealand in 2011. Andy Farrell, they were talking about Jack Charlton there, one of the texters. He must be feeling pretty fulfilled now, and adopted Irishman.
Well, I was just thinking today about the first season Andy Farrell was in charge in 2020, when he took over from Joe Schmidt, and the team was at a very low ebb, and Shane Horgan called for his head in his first year, and rugby was pretty poor, and they were losing games against England in particular where they were getting out muscled, and they were, Itoje and the Vunipolas were just on top of them, and they just looked like they were physically weaker than the opponents, and things weren't working. And he put in Jemison Gibson Park, and not a lot was made of it, but he played against England and Twickenham in a November game in front of no fans, and he was starting to try things, but it wasn't really coming off for him. And you were wondering where this was going to go. They kept it was this really odd thing where they kept running the ball into touch. They kept going off set phase move, and they get it out to James Lowe, and he'd end up in just running into touch. And you're like, what are they doing in training? And it clicked that day against England and Twickenham, and the day the Keith Earls try, and suddenly ever since, they've only lost 2 games since then. One was away to France and one was away to New Zealand. Since that day, when it all came together, they have just grown and grown and grown as a force, and he's become more and more comfortable in the job and in the role. And he now from people calling, respected people calling for his head with some good reason, because at the time the evidence that we were seeing, and we're not allowed to see training, was that things were going from bad to worse in some ways, was that things were going really badly. Now we're in a position where his contract's up after the next World Cup, and England will certainly be looking at him as the successor to Eddie Jones. The Lions will be looking at him going, hang on, he's just managed a tour to New Zealand where they had to play the Maori twice. He's been on 2 successful Lions tours before. Let's have this guy. And every club in France and England is surely, with a few bob, is going to be throwing money at him as well. So Ireland now are in a position where they have to do this this classic thing before a World Cup. Do we give him the new deal before the big show, or do we hold off, take our chances, and if he's gone, we get in Ron Nagara or someone, we promote Paul O'Connell or something like that. And that becomes the conversation, I think, after this, because he is hot property, and he has done an exceptional job at Ireland now in the last 18 months to 2 years, and should take enormous credit. I do think he's borrowed a little bit from his future to win this series, in that he didn't experiment very much during the 3 tests. We know this 15 and this 23 now can get the job done. We don't know as much about what's below them, and that could come back to haunt them next year, and you could throw that back in his face. But to win a series in New Zealand is an incredible achievement. A lot of people thought that things would fall apart when Joe Schmidt left, that he was the genius behind it, and he's left structures that Farrell has built on that shouldn't be diminished.
No,
but
and a winning legacy.
Yeah, but he's taken all the good things and he's added his own touch to it. He's made it a more relaxed environment. He said about that at the start. He's got an eye for a player. He's promoted players like Gibson Park,
who's a huge symbol of the tempo and the...
Absolutely, but he was second choice. He was sitting behind Luke McGrath at Leinster when he was picked to start for Ireland and Twickenham, when no one was calling for it. It wasn't as if there was a clamour. John Cooney was the one who there was clamour was for at the time. Gibson Park, you look at Craig Casey, there's 4 or 5 scrum halves who get more minutes than Craig Casey, but they like Craig Casey. He's always in that squad. Treadwell's another example. There are players in there who he has an eye for, and he's giving them back to the provinces going, look what you had. You didn't realise what you had, but you've got potentially a world-class 10 sitting in the number 12 jersey for your URC games. And that's really an outstanding talent to have. And others, Mike Cack on a lot of stick in that first year, but he's done a really good job developing that attack underneath Farrell as the attack coach. Bringing in O'Connell, a lot of coaches would have seen O'Connell as a threat, but he brought O'Connell in, and O'Connell has delivered. You look at the way the line-out maul, Ireland didn't have a line-out maul for much of the last 18 months. Suddenly they scored 2 tries off it today. That's a team that's evolving and improving. That's a sign of good coaching. John Fogarty has got the grips with the scrum. There's bigger tests for the scrum to come, but they struggled in test 1, test 2 and 3. It got better and better. There's a lot to like about the way Ireland are problem solving and evolving, and that has to come from the culture that the coach has set down and the coaching that he's giving as well, because he does get on the pitch and he does put it into place as well.
They will deserve, I don't know, maybe a trip to the Lord Mayor's office or something in Dublin, to be greeted off the plane. But they're going to have a well-deserved break now, these players and the management.
Yeah, well, Connacht, I don't know about the rest of the provinces. Connacht are back in pre-season this week, so right. It's already 2022-23. The World Cup season has already begun for some players, and there's probably players in pre-season in the provinces who will be eyeing up that place in France. And for all that the players will go off and have a break, and I'm sure the coaches will as well. They will have to be on it from the start of the next season, because the journey begins again. But yeah, no, there's a good long break now. There's no real serious rugby again until the URC kicks off in mid-September, I think, and then Europe isn't until December. So there's but the URC is a better competition now. The South Africans are in it, so there will be quality rugby. They play They play South Africa and Australia. I think Fiji in November. 3 good tests. 3 games that should bring them on again. Chance maybe to experiment a little bit into the Six Nations, but that's it. That's the 8 games, Six Nations, and then you're into World Cup warm up. So, it's exciting. It's very promising from an Irish perspective. But I think we've all learned. I'd like to think we've all learned that the job's certainly not done in the long term. But I mean, they went over there on a mission, and they come home with mission accomplished, and they're probably still up. I mean, it's probably 2 a.m. in Wellington. I'm sure they're all still up enjoying themselves, and they richly deserve that at the end of a long season and a long tour.
Rory, thanks as always. Brilliant stuff. Thanks for coming in. Rory O'Connor from the Irish Independent, reflecting on Ireland's historic series win over the All Blacks in Wellington today. 32-22 in the third test. We've won the series. Now, after the break, we're going to be back with the latest from the ladies' football semi-final between Kerry and Mayo. We'll also preview the Oaks. Stay with us.